there's something undeniably beautiful about York at Christmas time. The twinkling lights, the music, the warmth, all against the backdrop of narrow cobbled streets and tightly clad old buildings. The city has over 2,000 years worth of history. Vikings, Romans, kings and queens all left their mark on it. But today we're not here to talk about the stories of the crowned or the conquerors. We're here for the stories of ordinary people that once called this city their home. Now the backdrop might be York, but these voices, they could be from people from all over Britain in any of the towns and cities. And Charles Dickens, the man who many say gave us the Christmas spirit as we know it, he knew the streets of York pretty well. So as we step back today, it's going to be into a world that he would have recognised. We're here to discover the voices, the ghosts of the men, women and children who lived, worked and found lightness in the dark here.
Once upon a winter's day, when the air bit sharply and the frost still clung to the cobbles, the old city of York stirred beneath a pale December sky. Smoke curled above the rooftops, carrying the scent of coal fires and roasting chestnuts, and the bells of the minster rolled softly over the streets. In the shambles, traders called out their wares above the rattle of carts and the steady clop of horses. A brewer's dray creaked past, its barrels bound for the inns where the hearths already burned bright. Children chased each other through the market stalls, their laughter rising in clouds of breath, while women wrapped their shawls tighter against the cold. Carol singers gathered on the corner, their voices thin but hopeful, and from door to door went the collectors with their tin boxes and red noses, asking a penny for the poor. And all around them, the city readied itself for Christmas. A city of smoke and song, hardship and hope, where even in the pale light of winter, kindness still found a way to glow.
Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I am Claire and this is The Wanderlust Way. First off, let me say a huge thank you to everybody that supports the channel for liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, becoming members, sending super thanks, sending donations. Honestly, everything that you do helps this little corner of the internet to grow. It allows me to continue with adventures like this and sharing the stories that I find with you. So today we're going on a time travel adventure. We're here in the city of York, but we're going back once again to the Victorian age. But this time we're not here for the graveyards or the pit villages or even the prisons. Well, we might a little bit, but this time we're going to do something a little bit more festive. And we're going to look at Christmas through the eyes of ordinary people, not those that sat at the middle or the top of the tree. So the voices you're about to hear and the stories of the characters that you're about to meet, they aren't always one person taken from one account. So for example, if I say Clara, who works in the Draper's shop, she's not a real person as such. The story I've made has been created from lots of different historical documents combined together to show you what the people like Clara would have experienced, especially during the Victorian Christmas time. So, my friends, a big thank you first off to York Castle Museum who have allowed us to film there. But if you're ready for a festive adventure back in time, then maybe grab yourself a festive drink and perhaps a mince pie, because that is enough waffle. Let's wander. This is Kirkgate, York Castle Museum's recreation of a real Victorian street. Now the shops here, they are based on real businesses that operated in the city within the years 1870 to 1901. Because York at Christmas time in the late Victorian period, it was booming with the confectionery works and the railways and of course a growing middle class. Christmas for some, however, meant longer hours, colder mornings, but a little extra hope that the windows in their Christmas shops would bring in enough work and enough trade for the following year.
Morning crept upon York with a thin wintry light. the kind that seems uncertain whether to bless the earth or turn away again. The frost lay heavy on the roof tiles, and the breath of the chimneys hung about them like ghostly ribbons of smoke. Down the narrow lane of Kirkgate, shutters rattled open, and the shopkeepers emerged, stamping their feet and puffing into numbed hands as they set about their day's trade. Within the draper's shop stood young Clara, her fingers chapped, her shoulders stiff from the chill that lingered even as the fire sputtered in the grate. Bolts of cloth surrounded her like the pages of some great unwritten book. Velvets, serges, muslins and lace, each to be measured, folded and refolded till the light failed. She polished the window till it shone like ice, for the brighter the pane, the greater the hope of drawing a customer from the street. Yet, as she worked, she caught her own reflection there, pale, thin, and flecked with breath, and smiled faintly at the irony of trimming a world she could scarcely afford to enter. For Clara, this place was both workplace and home. The narrow bed above the shop, a reminder that security was something earned, not given.
Clara's world would have looked very much like this. The Drapers were the pride of the Victorian High Street, elegant, orderly and often run by hard-working girls for low wages, long hours and often with very few days off. Many of these girls would have lived in accommodation on site, meaning they were constantly surrounded by a luxury they could never afford. There was pride in it though, and there was often a chance to be part of that seasonal bustle, even if it meant looking from this side of the window rather than that.
Across the street, from a doorway yellowed with smoke, came the slow rhythm of labour. Samuel, the candlemaker's apprentice, bent over his moulds, the air around him thick with the sour scent of tallow and the hiss of cooling wax. He worked with quiet precision, trimming each wick, setting each taper straight, till his fingers stiffened in the chill. The poorer homes would burn his rough tallow candles, smoky and short-lived. The finer houses would glow with beeswax light. Yet Samuel made no distinction. To him, a flame was a flame, and if it brought warmth to another, it was enough. Outside, the fog gathered once more, and the glow from a single window fell across the cobbles like a blessing. Two young souls, divided by a street, yet joined in labour, each tending the city's hunger for light, one polishing it, the other creating it, while above them the bells of York ran soft and slow through the frozen air.
For people like Clara and Samuel, Christmas often meant work rather than wonder. They helped to light the city, but they rarely shared in its glow themselves.
And while they polished and poured to make things bright, the streets beyond were filled with other contrasts. The scent of sugar and spice, drifting past homes where there was barely anything to eat.
If there was one scent that defined a Victorian Christmas, then it might be sugar. Sweet shops, bakeries and confectionery shops were on the rise, and their air filled with caramel and spice. Now in York, Rowntrees and Terrys were amongst the growing names in that industry, and for Christmas time it could mean extra shifts for people to cope with the growing demand. But from the brightness and the charm of the shop windows, many were working in an industry experiencing luxuries that they would never actually afford themselves.
In the confectioner's workshop stood Arthur, his apron stiff with sugar and his hands dusted white as snow. Copper pans bubbled before him, the syrup inside turning from gold to amber as he stirred. The air was thick with sweetness, clinging to the walls, the ceiling, and his very breath. He worked without pause, boxing toffees and sugared almonds for the city's finest tables. The polished jars glimmered like jewels under the gaslight, each one a promise of pleasure to those who could pay for it. Arthur rarely tasted the things he made. The sugar was too precious, the waste too costly. but he liked the sound the jars made when he stacked them, a gentle chime like sleigh bells far away. The heat of the room was fierce, the kind that left his face flushed even in midwinter. He earned 8 shillings a week and was grateful for it, for the warmth, for the smell of the sugar, and for the knowledge that, in some small way, he was part of the city's Christmas joy. Confectionery work in York offered better conditions than many factory jobs, but it was still hard graft, long hours, heavy lifting and hot airless rooms. Workers like Arthur helped build York's reputation for chocolate and sweets, yet most could only dream of tasting the treats they made. Behind the bright windows of Kirkgate lies the city's slums. Narrow, smoke-hung veins of the city where life beats faintly but still endures. The air is sour with the reek of tallow and damp brick. The cobbles shine black beneath the weak winter light. They say here up to 50 people share one toilet. You can only imagine the rest. The narrow room our next character rents has seen many tenants come and go, each leaving behind a mark, a memory, a ghost of their own making. Here lives Elizabeth, a widow of 35, her husband taken by a fall at the railway works the Christmas before. Her home, if such a word can be used, is a single room, cramped and cold, where the walls weep in the rain and the pump in the yard freezes solid each December. She bends over her sewing now, the stub of a candle trembling beside her. The thread cuts her fingers, red and raw from soap and frost, yet she works on, patching a child's coat that will not keep out the wind. Beyond the wall the candlemaker's vats hiss and clatter, the smell of grease seeps through the cracks. It is work she knows by heart, though it pays barely enough to keep the fire in. And still she hums, so quietly the sound might be mistaken for the sigh of the fire itself. Outside, the wind tugs at the broken window frame, carrying with it a faint sweetness from the confectioners. Sugar and spice drifting down to the snicket like some small mercy. Elizabeth looks towards the noise of laughter spilling from the street beyond, and she smiles. It is Christmas Eve, and though the cupboard is bare, there is bread enough for tonight, and hope enough for tomorrow, and that for her is warmth enough.
Families like Elizabeth's would have been the hidden side of Victorian York. Social surveys taken at the turn of the century discovered that thousands of people lived in the slums, many in one-roomed dwellings such as this one. And they would have been damp, they would have been airless, they would have been quite bad for your health. However, this was the only option. And while the parlours above might have been filled with Arthur's sweets and Samuel's candles, the women down here, like Elizabeth, would have been working hard trying to keep the warmth in for their family. Now, even during these difficult times, there was still said to be resilience. Neighbours might share a crust, a song, or a little bit of extra warmth, especially at Christmas time.
Night settles over York like a closing hand. The glow from shop windows fades, and the laughter from taverns soften to an echo down the snickets and yards. The city exhales. Chimney smoke drifting across the river, candlelight guttering in narrow panes. Beyond the hum of Kirkgate, behind thick stone walls, another light burns low, a prison lamp, watched by women who count the hours till morning. Among them sits Alice, once a servant in a grand house, now paying the price of poverty in a room colder than any she ever cleaned. Before this was a museum, it was part of York Castle Jail, known in later years as the female prison. Women were held here, but so too were debtors and petty offenders of all kinds.
Some were here for theft, but many others, like Alice in our story, were here for debt. A missed payment, hours cut short, or even an illness could very easily lead somebody onto that poverty trail that would land them in the debtor's prison. Now, Alice, before she had worked as a servant in a wealthy house, she'd scrubbed the floors, she'd lit the candles and polished the silverware for people who barely knew her name. And when the employer felt like it, he cut her hours short, and that meant she missed her rent payment, and eventually she ended up here. Her daughter, whom we met earlier, Clara, in the Draper's shop on Kirkgate, she took that job because it offered her accommodation. Because previous to her mother becoming imprisoned, she had shared a tiny one-roomed dwelling with her mum, and they obviously did lose that, and now that home is being lived in by another, Elizabeth, in our story. And this just shows us that the hardship, it doesn't just simply disappear in cities like this for people like this. It moves from one doorstep to the next.
The night inside the prison is a cruel companion. Frost gathers on the inside of the walls, and the air smells of lime wash and damp straw. The women huddle together for warmth, their breath clouding the dark. A single lamp burns beyond the bars, its light trembling over coarse blankets and hollow faces. Among them sits Alice, quiet, pale, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Each night here adds to her debt. She owes even for the walls that confine her. Without help from charity or kin, her days would stretch endlessly, one upon another, like the stones beneath her feet. Then, faintly, from somewhere beyond the gates, a sound drifts through the cold. Voices. Carol singers, their tune carried by the wind, threading through the alleys and over the walls. Alice closes her eyes and she listens. Around her the women fall silent, letting the song spill through the cracks, thin, far away, but golden all the same. And out on Kirkgate, Clara pauses by the window of the Drapers, hearing that same carol pass along the street. The melody is faint, yet familiar, a reminder of Christmases long past, of a mother's hum beside a small fire. For a few fragile moments, the same song joins them both. One voice behind stone, one beneath falling snow, both bound by its mercy and its light.
People often associate Christmas time with charity, and in Victorian York that might mean a coin donated, some food shared, or even like the carol singers that we saw earlier, a little bit of song to uplift another person's spirit. Now, Ebenezer Scrooge, in A Christmas Carol written by Charles Dickens, who remembers the two guys that knocked on his door and asked him for some money for the poor, because it didn't go down very well at all, did it? But I think it's very easy to turn away your back on hardship when it isn't your own. But in cities like York, especially during the Victorian times for the very poor people, that charity, it wasn't just compassion. For some people, it was their survival. And at Christmas time especially, it's maybe a chance to see the light and be it where you can.
Christmas morning breaks upon York beneath a hush of falling snow. The rooftops wear a new white silence, softening the city's edges, dimming the scars of soot and smoke. Chimneys wake one by one, from the grand townhouses near the Minster to the narrow dwellings of Walmgate, all breathing the same cold air, all crowned by the same pale sky. In the fine rooms of the merchants, fires roar and silver gleams upon the breakfast tables. The scent of spice and roast meat drifts through the shutters. and children press their noses to the glass to watch the flakes dance in the light. Servants move quietly through the halls, polishing, pouring, tending the warmth that is not their own. On many of those tables sit the sugared fruits and bright toffees Arthur made by hand the night before, small luxuries born of long hours and aching fingers. Down in the poorer courts, the snow gathers thick upon the cobbles. Samuel, already awake, trims the wick of a few leftover stubs. Candle ends too short to sell, yet bright enough to burn. He wraps one carefully in brown paper and leaves it by the shop door, a gift of light from what would otherwise be waste. Clara, stepping through the quiet streets, finds the parcel waiting. She carries it inside and sets the candle in the window, its flame trembling like a living thing, fragile, defiant, beautiful. Elizabeth opens her door to sweep a path, smiling as the sound of distant bells spills across the roofs. And far beyond the prison gates, Alice stirs at that same sound, the faint chime of morning carried through stone, and for the first time in many days, she smiles. From the minster to the markets, the courts to the jail, the bells rise together, bright, certain, unbroken, and for one brief morning all of York stands still, bound by snow, by song, and by the small, enduring mercy of light.
Christmas morning in York would have begun like many others. A little frost, a little hardship, a little hope. A candle left in the doorway, a song carried on the wind, a neighbour sharing what little they had. And in the way, that is the light in the darkness. That is the compassion that Christmas is all about. And it's a message that I think still transcends into modern day York and modern cities as well. Because despite whatever's going on, despite all that darkness, we're all capable of sharing kindness and compassion with each other, especially at Christmas time.
Today, York at Christmas time still feels like something out of a storybook. The lights, the music, the scent of cinnamon and cold air. It's easy to forget that these streets have seen so many other Christmas mornings before ours. The people we've met in this story, Clara, Samuel, Elizabeth, Arthur, Alice, they're imagined, but their world they lived in was very real. A city of contrasts, hardship and hope, side by side.
Now, I often think about how little it can take to change somebody's day. A smile across the street, a kind word given, or a candle left burning in the window. The Victorians, it seems, gave us the Christmas spirit that we remember today. Not about receiving, is it? It's not about receiving, it's about the giving that we can do in those quiet moments when nobody else is watching.
And so, as the bells ring once more across this old city, I can't help but wonder how many ghosts of Christmas past still walk here, not to haunt, but to remind us to keep the flame burning.
So that is it. That is the end of our Victorian time travelling adventure. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments what you thought. Let me know what your favourite character was maybe. At this point, I want to say a massive thank you to York Castle Museum for not only allowing me to film on their site, but also for being so helpful. We got to see some little bits that the general public don't always get to see, so that was absolutely marvellous. I highly recommend coming if you are in the York area at any point, you know, you're coming for a visit. Definitely check it out. This is I've probably been about 10 times to be fair in the fact, and I could keep coming back and coming back and coming back. It's absolutely brilliant. So until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay curious, be kind, especially at Christmas, and just Merry Christmas. All right, thanks everyone. I've been Claire, this has been The Wanderlust Way. Take care.